push it that way. That's it. Sometimes we have, when we first came back after the pandemic, a lot, I guess, was...
All right.
He had to do loads of work to try and like boost it. Like, just stay in front of your mic.
Okay.
So, all good. You comfortable?
Yeah, I'm ready to go, mate.
Oh, thanks for joining us, Mike. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
Not bad at all. So your latest book, Dead Ground, which I actually bought earlier this week. I'm halfway through.
All right, okay.
It's brilliant. But I happen to admit I'm not a big reader. I don't read novels, but I thought, because I saw you on social media, somebody else recommended me. You recommended you as a guest, actually,
All right,
for the show. So I looked you up and started following you then.
I'll have to thank them. Who was it?
I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
But yeah, so I started looking up your stuff, and obviously you've won loads of awards for your books.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I can't really have you on without reading some of your your
Oh,
work.
okay.
And as a person who doesn't really read novels, I was hooked.
That's
It's
good,
only
that's
time. It's only actual time that stopped me finishing your book.
good. It's quite surprising, actually. A lot of... it's mainly women, actually, will tell me that their husbands only read when on holiday, but
Right.
the will read my books. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
So it came out on the 3rd of June, and it was,
If you say so, yeah. I
I
think
looked it
around
up.
about then, yeah.
and it was with the Little Brown Book Group.
Yes, well, Constable, which is a little brown, a very famous and old Little Brown imprint.
Yeah.
They've got 15 or 16 imprints. I mean,
How many books have you had with them?
This will be my 6th out. 4 in the Poe series, and they bought my previous series off my old publisher and re-released them with new covers and stuff. And I've got another 3 books due
Right.
in the contract.
So before we go back in time, so how would you describe this latest book then? What's the premise of it?
Well, it starts off with a bank robbery when everyone's wearing James Bond masks. And
That didn't make me laugh out loud. That
yeah, it was quite, because I do try and give sort of high impact openings. Normally they're quite gruesome, but this one was more of a comedic one.
yeah.
And they're not actually there to steal anything. They're there to actually kill one of the robbers who clearly isn't in on that part of the plan. And then we'll go back to Poe and Tilly, and then Poe gets called up to Carlisle to work with MI5 to lead a team, actually, including MI5 and the FBI.
And it's based in Cumbria, which I liked.
All my books are based in Cumbria.
Yeah, I like that.
And they're called to a pop-up brothel, actually, in Carlisle, because that's a thing now. Who knew?
Pop up anything.
Well, it's a business opportunity if you've got if you're going away for a bit. And Poe he's not really sure why the security services want him investigating what looks to be someone who's been murdered by a pimp, basically.
Right.
But it's obviously a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And it has its roots in a wartime atrocities type thing. So.
Because I'd seen you when I started following you, I'd seen you've been in various media, whether it be you've been on a podcast and a couple of magazines and stuff like that, bits and bobs about the new book.
Yeah, I'm a bit like fungus. I get everywhere.
But at the same time, I was looking at most of them covered the similar sort of subjects, like you were just talking about the book, which is why I wanted to get you on here to go a bit, like, find out about you as a person.
Well, I mean, the first book was out in the series was out in 18. I think that's right. Yeah, 18, and there's been pretty much consistent press coverage since then. So they've all been. So nowadays, particularly for magazines.
When I was looking them up, I was like, I've seen these before.
Yeah.
Like, so obviously they've been around. I was like, I've definitely recognised a few of the covers, so which is good.
And the photographs. I mean, they don't do a photo shoot for every time I'm being interviewed. So.
Yeah.
There was one actually in they did a shoot in Dalston, and the photographer took a just on the grass on this little green pile of my books. And then I think it was a News and Star. They'd said Mike Craven above, and it wasn't. It was just a pile of books. But that photograph kept on appearing in magazines, just me pretending to be a pile of books.
You've had some pro shots done, because I saw some of them online where you're looking all moody and.
Yeah.
You got to have them done.
Well, all the ones that you see in magazines are professionally done by local photographers.
Yeah.
I've just had a shoot done by a fellow called Milton somebody, but he used to photograph the Beatles, and he's a friend of Jake Burns, who's the lead singer of Stiff Little Fingers, who was my icon when I was
I saw a picture of you wearing their t-shirt.
Yeah, but Jake Burns actually is a big fan of mine, and he gets in touch. And he put a big post on Facebook about how much he enjoyed my books, and all his friends should buy them, and all these punks that start going to woodwork. So I sort of cornered the geriatric punk market, which is pretty cool. But this guy Milton, just out of the blue, says, "Can I just do a shoot and I'll try and place it somewhere?" And I think it's going to be in Lancashire Life in a couple of months.
Cool. So you say you've got like another 2 or 3 books already done, pretty much.
Well, the contract was for 3, 2 Poes and a standalone, and they're all written now. I sent Poe 6 off to my agent just on Friday, actually. Then I recalled it and sent a brand new version this morning because I forgot to explain something. So he'll get back to me with his thoughts on it, and then we'll rework whatever he thinks. We'll have a discussion, and then we'll send it to my editor.
I've always wondered this. When you start in a book, where do you start? Like if you sign a deal and someone gives you time and a bit of money, and you go, right, I need to write a book. What? Well,
it's strange, actually, particularly for your first book, because you've had as much time as you need for your first book.
It's like your first album, isn't it?
Yeah. So you've had all your ideas and all your clever lines of dialogue, but you've basically you could have 10 years, you could have 15 years, but once you get your book deal, if you're with a traditional publisher like I am, it's a book a year.
A year, right.
Now, some are going for a book every 4 months, some of the digital publishers, because they're wanting... Their market is a lot of work, and it takes me about 8 months to write a book.
I imagine you can't force yourself to do it if you're not feeling it.
Well, actually, that's the bit. Then, if you're a professional writer, which I am, and I've been since 2015, then you've got to treat it as work.
Yeah,
and you've got to sit down at a computer. And you might not feel it that day, but you've got to get some words down.
Okay. So how do you deal with like writer's block, or if you're just not feeling it?
I think that's just a lazy way of describing that you can't be bothered.
Well, I mean, like same from like as a musician, like sometimes you're trying to, you've got to come up with something, but you just can't. You just struggle. So I often just leave it and come back like in a day or two and just go, I feel better now, or a different take on it.
I tend to struggle when I'm describing a house or something like that.
Right.
I'll think, how can I do this in a way?
But you don't struggle for ideas for the actual content of the book.
No, they're there. I mean, if anything, I've got too many ideas.
It's never a bad thing.
So yeah, it's getting down. I mean, but getting down the first draft, and that's the hard work. Once you've got something to edit, editing's the fun bit when you can just shape it. And
and
it's a bit like sculpting. Your first outline is just a very rough outline. You can hardly tell when it is.
And just some books you look back and some books were like easier in compared to writing other ones that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. The Puppet Show took me 25 days to get a first draft down. That's the first in the series, and the third one, The Curator, took 8 months for the first draft.
Right. Okay. Because again, as a musician, I equate that to sometimes I've written a song in a day, and other times it's taken a whole year for me to actually find the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, with the Puppet Show, I pretty much knew what I was going to be doing because it was supposed to be the third book in my first series.
Right.
And for The Creator, which was the third book, I had pitched the genesis of Dead Ground actually to my editor, and she said no, she didn't want that, so I had to come up with something from scratch. So I was sitting down day one, so right, what am I going to do?
You're like, oh shit.
Yeah. So my initial idea for The Creator had something to do with a chess prodigy, and I'm sort of glad I didn't now, because that Netflix series,
Queen's Gambit.
The Queen's Gambit was sort of
similar,
and it would have been out around about the same time, and it would have looked as though I was just jumping on a bandwagon, even though I'd written it 2 years before. Because they need an 18-month lead-in. So, I mean, the books I submit now, they won't be seen for at least 2 years. In fact, The Mercy Chair, which is book 6, I don't think it's out till 2024. So
that's strange, because sometimes you'll have done a book, sent it off, it's all done, forgotten about it, maybe you haven't written something else, and then, that other books I did a year ago, it's coming out now.
Normally it's 2 books. So when people are reading Dead Ground, I had just finished the first draft of book 6. So people talk to me about Dead Ground, and I can't remember it, because I generally, people know it better than me, because I wrote it so long
at
ago.
the time, if someone asking you questions when you just finished it, you'd know all about it, but then you've moved on.
But no one's read it, because me, my editor, and my agent.
Must be nice, though, to come back when you're getting the feedback from books when they're out.
Yeah, but then there's always something you'd wish you'd done different, and things. I mean,
there's always going to be that.
Yeah. So, and you don't ever really finish writing the book. You just decide to stop.
Yeah, it's like, how do you decide when it's done?
Well, that is the thing. I mean, how many?
Or a deadline's approaching, you got
how many times are you just going to edit it? I mean, you'll find some authors will go through it 23, 24 times. Others will just write it once and that's it.
Is there a point maybe where you're reaching a peak editing, and then you've gone over that now? You're making it worse by if you carry on editing.
Well, I used to watch that landscape portrait or landscape artist of the year, or portrait artist of the year, and there is a point where it's right.
Yeah.
And
you're maybe looking for something and you don't really need to.
And then anything you do then is actually making it worse again.
Yeah.
And I think to that point,
That
there is a natural time when you've got to let, and then my agent will have a look and he will make suggestions. Sometimes big changes he wants, and sometimes he's got one problem or something like that. Then my editor gets it, then my line edit, and then my copy edit, then my desk edit, and blah blah blah. It goes through the whole process. So what I send in at the start,
I guess a lot of that comes with experience as well.
Well, I'm getting there. I mean, yeah. I mean,
so how many books in total have you done? Like that are out, including Dead Ground now?
There's 6 out now.
6 out now.
And
your first one was?
My first one was Born in the Burial Gown. That was out in 2015.
So fairly prolific since then.
I've been busy. I've written at least one book a year. During the pandemic, I've wrote a lot more. I've wrote a lot of short stories and a novella.
Okay.
A few things like that. So I'm established now. I know what I'm doing, and hopefully I'm getting better with each book.
So what was it like getting your first book out there then? Sense of achievement?
It was, but it was with a small publisher, so it was sort of mixed in that. Yeah, I know this isn't ultimately where I want to be.
Right.
But my first book, the most useful thing about the first book was that I was able to give it to my future agent and said, "Yeah, what do you think of this?" And he read it and he said, "Really enjoyed it. When you've got another book, please do send it to me." Which I did, and that was Body Breaker. And he said, "I would like to sign you, but the series, because it's with a small publisher, isn't really selling well, and publishers will look at that and they won't want to take that series on. So if I'm going to sign you, I need you to either rewrite Body Breaker as the first in a new series, or I won't be able to sign you." And I said, "Well, okay." And then I had a think. I said, "It'll be easier for me just to start a new book from
something
scratch."
else.
And I wrote The Puppet Show. Like I said, I wrote that in 25 days, because that would have been the third book in that sort of arc.
So that became a standalone?
Well, it became the first in the new series.
I see, yeah.
So there's 2 in the first series, which will never... I mean, it ended on a cliffhanger, but I don't care.
People are going, when's he going to finish this?
Yeah, they do. Once I get emails all the time. But they just want Poe. I mean, they want Poe books. And I wrote a standalone when I was... still in probation, actually. I used to write in my lunchtimes, just because I wanted to see if I could write a book from a first-person point of view. You know, like I did this, I walked, that type of thing. And
so explain Washington Poe for people who don't know.
Well, he is at the start of the series. He's a bit of a hermit, actually. He's living on Shatfell in this croft because he was a social pariah. The press were all over him because he was supposed to have killed a suspect, and this serial killer is burning people alive in the stone circles of Cumbria, and the third body, when they put it through this process, and they find something's been carved on his chest before he was burnt alive, and it's actually the name Washington Poe. So he's brought back from retirement to sort of work on this case, and because people think he's going to be the next victim, that's why his name was carved onto this guy's chest. So he's quite keen to solve the case before it happens, and he gets teamed up with this civilian analyst called Tilly Bradshaw, who has never been out of academia. She was taken out of school when she was 13 to go to Oxford and read pure mathematics, and they end up a sort of oddball couple. And they don't like each other to start with, but they're sort of very good friends now. And a lot of the there was a review in a magazine called The Quietus, which isn't something I'm familiar with. But
I know of it. Yeah,
they've got a huge,
they're
a huge
popular
thing. Yeah, and they said it's the macabre, grisly, blood-soaked murders that draw you in, but it's the characters that you come back for.
Yeah,
and I think that's right. I think people are more interested. They're interested in what Poe and Tilly.
When I was reading Dead Ground, I was like, oh, there's history here that I need to. I need to go back.
Yeah, they can all be read as standalones. I mean,
but I didn't feel like I was missing out.
Yeah, you shouldn't be. I mean, they're written that way. Dead Ground was actually the hardest because something happened at the end of the creator, which was horrific, and it sort of affected the team dynamics a little bit. But you should still be able to read Dead Ground without actually sussing what happened.
I'm eventually going to go. Book. I'm probably going to go backwards.
Should I say I would have bought you some? I would have bought you some in because
I
mean I get copies thrown at me.
Yeah, but so have you been since the book came out? Have you been pretty much doing a press as much as you can?
There's been a fair bit of promotion. Ordinarily, we'd have a launch in Covent Garden because my agent owns a big bookshop there. and we'd have a Cumbrian launch, a big live thing.
Yeah.
That didn't happen this year because it happened just before the sort of unlocking, and we didn't go out to London for the same reason. So a lot of the events I did were online, and for the first time, actually, I had events every night of the week and some during the day, but I had nothing on publication day. So the first time I was able to go to the pub, because usually I'm the soberest at my launches because I'm sort of being interviewed, so I stay sober for that. Then I'm signing books at the end when everyone's sort of throwing the beers down. So I sort of join everyone at 10 o'clock at night. I sort of wish I was in the audience watching myself so I could have a few beers.
Yeah, but so Washington Poe as a character, where'd you start? How many characters would you say you've created at that level?
In what way?
As in, because he's a very specific character, I guess, and people seem to be drawn to him.
Yeah, he's been on a bit of a journey. He was quite dark, and he could behave quite. He could staggering overreactions, mainly violent, in the first book. He crushed somebody's hand while he was holding some glass, and he threatened to twist someone's fingers off, mainly because of Tilly. He was sort of standing up for Tilly. Now Tilly doesn't need standing up for, and he's mellowed a lot, so he's been a bit of a journey. So has Tilly. And there's some of the key characters that I've brought in the series gradually that are in Dead Ground. So like Estelle Doyle, the pathologist, the boss, D.I. Stephanie Flynn. She's not in Dead Ground as much because of something that happened in the previous book. So I've got a few characters. And in the first book, Fluke, Avison Fluke, he was my lead, and he's sort of he's the genesis of who Poe was. He sort of had I took the part, because I didn't think anyone was ever going to read this series. I took the parts I liked, which was like someone living on, because Fluke lived in a cabin above Ullswater. So I took that isolated living, and I took the fact that he had a very strong friendship. It was with an ex-paratrooper in the Fluke series, but obviously it's Tilly in this series. So I was able to take the bits I like. And I shouldn't have, but I took a complete plot point from Burial Gown and used it in the curator. And then Little Brown bought my Fluke series and released them the same year the curator was out, so I had to quickly rewrite the ending for Burial Gown because I had virtually identical endings.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I like creating characters, and I've always sort of come from the position that they've got to be able to stand on their own. That readers should, unless it's just somebody delivering a bit of paper or something. If they're on the page, if they're in the book for more than a page, or so they need to have a back. I need to sort of understand a bit about them. So there's a character called Bugger Rumble in Dead Ground, who's a sort of street. He's a homeless guy, but he's a street performer. And I wrote him, and as soon as I wrote him, I thought he's going to be a recurring character because he was so much fun to write. So I've just written him into Poe 6 as well for another. He's got a new act this time.
So where's a lot of inspiration for your characters coming from?
Well, Bugger Rumble actually. He came. There was when I was going to the match in Newcastle. When I was going to see Newcastle. We used to go to the Northumberland Arms before the game sometimes, which is a pub near Eldon Square on Northumberland Street. And there was basically a pisshead really, and he would draw a line on the ground with chalk, and you would pretend he was tight rope walking, and he would do wobbles and things, and at the end he would sort of bow, and he would wait until he had enough money, and then as soon as he had enough he would dive into Northumberland Arms for a pint. And I thought, well, that's good. And then just so when I was creating this character, I thought, well, I could just use that, and my mate had challenged me to get the phrase Bugger Rumbled into my next book, so I thought, well, Bugger Rumble, that's a great name, a great name. So I mean, sometimes it is something as stupid as that. Other times sometimes you just need a character to do a certain thing, so they behave a certain way anyway.
I'm assuming you've got a big notebook full of all these ideas for either characters or titles.
I just sort of remember it. So,
okay.
But if you asked me what colour someone's eyes were, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what Poe's eyes, what colour they were. I was talking to Marc Billingham actually once, and he said that there are frequent arguments online about what colour Tom Thorne's eyes were. Marc Billingham was one of the biggest crime writers in the UK. Tom Thorne's one of the most famous characters. and he says, they might be right, they might be wrong. I've never actually said what colour his eyes are. So all these people are having arguments, saying, oh, it was in book 6, he said grey, and book 7, he said blue, and all this type of thing. And he said, I've never described them. So
It's funny because the fans like take it to a whole other.
they do. They absolutely.
It lives on without
they
you.
They own it, and
Yeah.
and sometimes they'll get me. They'll say, "I miss Tilly and Poe, and I wonder what they're up to now." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's just weird because
They're in here. They live in there.
They're just bits of. I mean, they're basically squiggles on a bit of paper. I mean,
Yeah.
and these squiggles somehow then translate into an actual picture in your mind. I
Have
mean,
these characters ever been drawn or brought to life in any way?
They got quite close. The TV deal, the first TV deal, that went all the way to the head guy at the BBC. In fact, if it hadn't been for COVID, it would have been.
I was going to ask, has any of your stuff been made for?
Yeah, I mean, they optioned
TV
it, then they re-optioned it, then they re-optioned it. So they had 3 options in total, but the COVID landscape changed. The COVID changed that commissioning landscape, so they didn't. It'll get sold again. And I was at a big crime writing festival weekend before last, Harrogate, and I was approached by a TV guy there who's asked me to write a treatment. And then he had to explain what a treatment was because, I mean, it's a completely different discipline.
Yeah.
So he's told me, and I said I'll have a go, and we'll see what happens. But it's not something I've been massively interested in.
I was just wondering if you saw then, because how much control would you have over it? If someone's making it TV, they might make changes.
Well, the contracts I had, I think I was contracted to be consulted about plot points and key characters
Right.
and casting decisions. But consulting, I mean, that just means you're going to get asked. Doesn't mean doesn't mean you get the approval. You get consulted the same way I get consulted when my wife wants to buy a handbag. She's just going to do whatever she wants to do, which is absolutely fine. But yeah, so the TV, I mean, it's never something that was on my radar, and it's not something that particularly interests me because I mean, I have been every now and then I get asked, do you want to get involved in this the script writing, and I always say no, absolutely no. I absolutely don't.
It's a compliment, I think, at the end of the day, isn't it? If someone wants to use your work in another way.
Well, yeah. And, I mean, when I listen to the audiobooks, I can't listen to the audiobooks because...
Do you do your own?
No. There's a voice actor does it. A guy called John Banks, who's a lovely man, really, really nice. And I chose him because I was given his audition tapes, and he sounds really, really posh. He's from Yorkshire, but I didn't know that at the time because he certainly doesn't sound like a Yorkshireman. And I thought this will be really funny listening to him do Poe's voice and swearing, because there's a lot of swearing in the first book particularly. And he just does it, and he does his own voices for the characters. But they're not my voices. They're not how I would hear it. It's just his interpretation of it. And I thought... and the audiobooks they're very, very popular.
Yeah.
Audiobooks in general are very
it's
popular.
massive.
I mean, it's the fastest growing part of the book market.
I think Stephen King voiced over one of his first audiobooks, and it didn't work.
I think everyone, well, a lot of people like to have a go. I've got a friend called Marc Griffin, who used to be a gladiator,
right?
A TV gladiator, not like
from back in the 90s.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah. I don't know what he was called. He does tell us, and he still does and he's on these incredibly extreme diets where he's only allowed X amount of ounces of protein. He has a dietitian on speed dial, that type of thing. Yeah, but he's an actor as well. And I think the last thing he was in was The Punisher. I think he was filming some Punisher thing when he was actually the Punisher, Marvel's Punisher. And he got quite upset that he wasn't allowed to do his own books. 'Cause he's an author, he's with the same publisher as me, and he got quite upset he wasn't allowed to do his own. Audio books, and I think ultimately he sort of understands why that's not a good idea.
No, I think it's what's best for the customer, because I think Stephen King wanted to do it, but then when he got feedback from it, people was like, you need to hire actors because it's you can do it on the page, but you can't deliver it verbally.
I think you're too close to it. I think is the thing. Well, I mean, I couldn't do it anyway because I would feel too...
It's still acting, even though it's just your voice.
It is. It absolutely is. It's a very definite skill. Yeah. And, I mean, I couldn't do it. I absolutely couldn't do it. I could read it. Yeah. But I couldn't act it.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, and there is a big difference.
Yeah. So for you, crime, why just crime? Have you expanded into anything else? Have you tried other genres?
Yeah, I mean, I've the standalone I've got coming out in the next couple of years is an action thriller set in the States, and I have actually dabbled with a children's fantasy book. And at some point, I'll probably go back to about 70,000 words into it, which means it's already about 10,000 words too long for a children's book. And But I chose crime basically because I was a probation officer when I was writing it, and it sort of gave a bit of credibility, a bit like if you were a surgeon, you wouldn't write about an investigative journalist as a protagonist, and vice versa.
So that started you down that path.
Yeah, and I did read crime books. Anyway.
Oh, I see.
It wasn't the only thing I read, but I was.
But the two kind of tied in together.
Yeah, they did, and I thought I'll give that a go.
How long have you been writing for before you actually got published?
Probably ever since I was a child, on and off. I mean, I stopped when I was in the army, but I read an awful lot in the army. Then I started up again when I was very ill in 2003, and my first book, actually, I started to write again after I got out of hospital about 8 months later, and I started to write. But initially I just wanted to do a sort of write about my experiences of being told you're going to die and living on a cancer ward and all the quite dark but humorous things that can happen. And I thought that's who's going to want to read that self-indulgent bollocks, really. But I thought I'll give my lead character the same illness I had, which is what happened to Fluke. So he was at the start of the book. He's just coming back from the same illness I had. So that's how that sort of started. It was a natural marry. And now I'm known as a crime writer. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I would struggle to. I'd have to change my name. I'd have to use a pen name if I wanted to write something else. But I read all sorts of stuff, but I acknowledge that I wouldn't be the best person. There's people who are writing that stuff who are far better than me, and I'll just enjoy what they do rather than try and copy them.
That's cool. But yeah, so when did words and language become your thing? When you were very young?
I've always read, and I think all writers, all authors are ultimately readers. And I read about 150 books a year.
Jeezy, crazy.
And I read one. I write one.
Right.
So I'm a reader more than a writer.
Okay, yeah.
If you look at it that way. And I mean, I know people who read 1 or 2 books a day. I mean, it's just insane, insane amount of reading that they do. So my love of fiction came from there. I rarely read non-fiction. The last non-fictional book was Bruce Dickinson's autobiography, actually.
Yeah.
Which I've had signed, which was
very good.
Very
yeah,
nice.
I've read that one. It's a good read.
It is. It's very funny as well. In fact, it was funny actually. This guy called P.L. Kane, I think he's an author, but he's got a sort of Eastern European sounding name, his real name. So out of the blue, this fellow called Carl just got in touch with me out of email, said, "Would you like to read my book and give me a cover quote?" So I thought, well, I'll give it a go because I mean I'm always on the lookout for books anyway. So I did, and I enjoyed it, and I gave him a quote, and he was very happy. And I happened to meet him at a crime writing festival in London. I was just walking up the stairs, and he was walking down. I had my Iron Maiden t-shirt on, and he said, and he also introduced himself, and you're Iron Maiden fans. Oh yeah, huge. I've just come back from Vegas and all that type of stuff to see them. And he said, my dad is Bruce Dickinson's fencing trainer.
Yeah. He
said, and I will quite regularly spar with him fencing because I'm a fencer as well. So do you want anything you want signed? I said, yes. So he gave me his address, and I just sent a whole box load of stuff to get signed. But then COVID happened, and also Bruce Dickinson got divorced, and he ended up in Paris when COVID happened. So it didn't happen for ages. But eventually, my book got sent back with best wishes, Bruce Dickinson. So it's nice to be nice.
Yeah. Always be nice. You never know. But yeah, so when did you start actually thinking you could actually write as a career? How did that come about?
In 2013, I'd been looking for a couple of years actually. A competition for unpublished writers called the Debut Dagger with the Crime Writers Association.
Oh, yeah.
And all you had to do was submit your first up to your first 3,000 words, certainly no more, 1,000 word synopsis. And I've been saying I'll enter that for ages. And eventually I took a week off work and I wrote 3,000 words in 3 days. And I spent 2 days doing the synopsis. And I sent that off. And I got shortlisted against all probability. And I got invited out in London. And I met Lee Child and Frederick Forsyth and loads of other authors. And I didn't win. But at that point, then shortly after, an agent contacted me and said, "Can I read the rest of the book?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just finishing it off." And I'd literally written about 2,500 words of it. So I said, she said, "How long do you think you'll need?" And I said, 6 months, and she said, and she knew what I'd done. So anyway, I wrote it, and she roundly slagged it off and said it was awful. But she gave me some very good feedback. And at that point, I thought, well, maybe because I sort of understood the feedback she was giving us, and I sort of instinctively thought
like
it was probably
accurate criticism sort of thing.
I thought, yeah, she's right, and I understand why she's saying that. And I thought,
Plus,
well,
as a reader yourself, you probably made sense.
It's, I mean, the first, because it was what is now Born the Burial Ground, but it was 150,000 words long, and most novels are about 85, 90,000.
Right.
So it was just huge. It had morphed into an international thriller. I had Fluke fighting off somebody with an AK-47 with a big massive church candle. I mean, it was utterly ridiculous. But I because I understood what she did, I rewrote it, and then I met a publisher and I submitted it to him. I said, look, it was shortlisted for the debut Dagger, and he signed me on the back of that. So that was. Cool. But it was at that point. It was probably when I was reading the feedback. I thought, yeah, Ash is right. I understand what I need to do to fix it. I thought so. I could do that. And then once you're a published writer, you get a little jolt of confidence.
Yeah,
and you think you're unbeatable.
But you never stop learning.
Absolutely, you don't. Every time I write a book, particularly during the copy editing stage, this time because all these like grammar Nazis will have a look, and they'll tell you things that you just didn't know.
Quite often, though, they don't matter.
They don't to most readers, but there's always pedantic people who will.
It'll always be there.
Yeah, things like a hanging hyphen. Because I sent my desk editor. I said, look, there's an error in this. It's just a random hyphen. It doesn't actually have a word after it. And she said, no, it's a hanging hyphen. It means if you're saying pre-war, pre-war would be a perfectly correct. But if you're saying pre and post-war, you would have pre, hanging hyphen, and post.
Right, okay.
With a hyphen.
Right, yeah.
And I'd never come across that before. I didn't have a clue. It just looked like an error to me. And I said, if it looks like an error to me, it's probably going to look like an error to a few people, actually.
Yeah.
So I said, we'll just take it out and I'll just change that sentence so we don't have a hanging hyphen because it just looks wrong. Which is funny, actually, because editors sometimes will make you change things that are right, but most people think are wrong. So they'll make you change it to the wrong thing because that's what most people think. Otherwise, I know a historical author who was writing about, sort of the 1800s, the early sort of when there was like poor houses and you could go to prison for just being poor, basically. And there was a dye. She was describing this dye, and her editor got in touch and said, "Look, me and you know that this dye existed at this point, but most readers of historical fiction don't think it came till about the next century, the century after. So can we just change it? I know you're right, but you're just going to get more grief putting this correct fact in." So I'm not sure if something like that happened to me. I think I'd just dig my heels in. And maybe just put a note in at the end, just saying.
Is there anything that you can think of where something in one of your books has caused controversy or
Dry Stone Walls? That was the one that comes out in the first book. My editor wanted to change, or my copy editor actually, so he's like the guy who does the grammar and the sentence structure. He said it's 2 words. It's dry stone wall.
Okay.
So dry. And then I said, no, it's 3 words. In Cumbria, it's 3 words. It's dry stone wall. And he said, well, it might be hyphened. It's in the Oxford Manual of Style is the sort of Bible that everyone uses.
Right,
that's how, in the Chicago Manual of Style in the States. But that's what you use. If there's any argument, you say like that Manual of Style says that, so that's what we're doing. And I said, no, no, it's dry stone wall. And I ended up getting in touch with the Dry Stone Wall Association, who I think in Cumbrian. And I said, back me up here. And they did. They said, you're absolutely right. But I see it in other people's books, and they've obviously caved because they've actually got it as 2 words, or maybe 3 words with 2 of them hyphened. And I'm like, yeah.
God, there's an association for everything, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Can we let's bring them up? Let's bring them up. I bet they don't get a lot of PR.
When we were in probation, that was one of the things that we would get the guys on probation to do. There was a lot of dry stone wall courses that you could go on.
Yeah.
In fact, there's probably more qualified dry stone wallers in Cumbria than anywhere else in the world because
it's the
we'll put them on probation.
DSWA, obviously.
Oh, of course it is. There we go. Look at those guys go.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
There's 3 words. Look.
There it is. Look, right there.
Dry stone walling. It's on It's on their official website, so it must be right.
Org.uk as well.
Yeah. I got a very long email back. They were very happy to be asked, I think, but they probably don't get much mail, to be honest.
Oh, that's funny. Well, always there when you need them. But yeah. So, is there any like parts of your story that have caused controversy with people? Where people you go, oh, I didn't even think about that. But
in the second book, actually, Black Summer, I initially had a court scene where Poe's watching a trial, and it turns out to be a false trial. They were basically just tricking someone into doing something, and it was stupid. And when I finished writing it, I thought, right, there's no way that's staying in. At the end, when I come back to do my first, I'll just be changing that completely. And I did, and I ended up in a restaurant scene, and Poe's visiting. We don't know it's Poe at the start. And I described the cooking of this little songbird called the Ortolan bunting, which I just didn't give it two thoughts. I just thought, right, it's just a scene. I put it in quickly because I was changing the scene at the last minute. And I don't even go too graphic. It's outlawed now in France, but it used to be a delicacy. And you would net these little birds, little thumb-sized birds, I describe them, and you would fatten them up by... the Romans used to poke their eyes out to make them think it was night because they eat at night.
Okay.
The more humane thing, and I don't know, the French aren't known for humanely treating animals, but they do. And you put them in a sort of box, a dark box, and then they feed them seed and millet and whatever else until they're about four times the size. And then they drown them in brandy. That's how they dispatch them.
Mm-hmm.
And they cook them whole. They pluck them, then cook them whole, and then you eat them in one go. You put the bird in your mouth, and then you bite down so the head falls onto the plate. You put hanky over your head, which creates a scent tent, and also hides your gluttony from God. Apparently, this is all wacky stuff. So I was describing this. I didn't think anything. I thought it was an interesting scene, but the amount of feedback. It's probably the most famous scene. If I ask readers, which scene did you find the most disturbing? It's not that I was murdering children or chopping people up and sous videing them. It was like I've done in some books. It was this little songbird that was getting drowned in brandy and then eaten whole. It's just extraordinary. And that's because my agent ran me up straight away, and he speaks French, and he just waffled a load of French at me. So I've got no idea what you're saying, David. And he was just going on about this bloody scene, and I thought, wow, that I suppose that's the power of writing, isn't it? You don't know how words affect different people.
That's true.
Absolutely differently, which is lovely.
I was going to ask if, do you wish you'd started trying to write novels earlier, but at the same time, you need a certain amount of life experience to be able to write the books, so maybe not. Yeah,
I did a piece for Call Out Living not that long ago, when I said pretty much this exact thing. I said everything that's happened to me now is I'm the sum total of my parts now.
Yeah.
And every decision I've made or didn't make, or every mistake I've made, has sort of still led me up to this path. So if I'd made the decision to start earlier, I don't know what would have happened. I might have not been at that conference where I met my agent, that type of thing. So you might have missed all these opportunities.
You wouldn't have a lot of your ideas probably if you didn't work in the prison service.
And there's that as well. It was probation, but you're absolutely right. Particularly how Cumbria worked. Because I was a chief officer grade by the time I finished. So I was going to the high level police meetings and the counter-terrorism meetings and all these things. So you understand where the sort of sticking points are in the county and where the sort of you see sort of beneath the covers as it were. I do say every now and then when because sometimes I get forced into what would you have done differently, and the answer I give is I wish I'd done my A levels while I was still in the army. I joined the army when I was 16, so I didn't do them when I was before. And when I was leaving, when I made the decision to leave, I could have done my A levels then, which would have then got me into my social work degree.
Right, yeah.
Instead, I decided to do beekeeping and bodyguarding, which is obviously as much use as
beekeeping.
Yeah. Well, in the end, I didn't even do that. So I just pretended I'd been there and went and had 2 weeks with my friend in Bathenswink, Cumbria, in the pub. So I did a bodyguarding course. If I'd thought ahead, I would have done my A levels, because I had to then do a year of college basically just to get qualifications to do my degree, which is what I wanted to do ultimately. Although I didn't know I wanted to do that when I left.
Who knows what they want to do at that age?
Well, I've been in the army 12 years. I should have given it a little bit of thought. But
how old were you when you went in the army?
I was 16. I left when I was 29, I think, or 28.
Was that something you just knew you wanted to do, or
no? Absolutely not. You find the more all my decisions have just actually happened. I went to the recruiting office with my friend who wanted to join the infantry, just for something to do. I had no intention to join. I'd even considered it. And the recruiting sergeant said, "You might as well take the test while you're here." And I was like, "Well," he said, "if you're not, you're just going to be sitting here." Oh, yeah, that's a fair point. And then I ended up...
That's a sly recruiting tactic, isn't it?
I ended up signing there and then to go through the selection process. My friend was, I'll think about it, and he never did. And he's a painter and decorator now, has been all his life.
Oh, well.
So that wasn't the decision. I left the army on the spur of the moment. I didn't give it any thought whatsoever, which is why I didn't do my A levels before.
So what did you do whilst you were in the army? Where did it take you?
I was an armourer, so I fixed guns basically.
I
fixed like rifles and mortars and handguns and machine guns and all that type of stuff.
So when you joined, you didn't really have a choice of what you wanted to do. They just said, "You're doing this."
No, they did. They said, "This is what you're clever enough to do."
Right.
That list over there, just ignore that. You're not clever enough to do that. So you might think you're clever enough to fix radars, but you're really not.
It's what they always show on the adverts, isn't it?
Yeah. But I'd scored fairly highly, so I had a big range of stuff. And the initial there was an intelligence test, which was just to weed out the actual real numbskulls.
Right. Yeah.
And that, which I scored 99 out of 100. And to this day, I'm shocked I didn't get 100 because the questions were as simple, which is the odd one out: steamboat, powerboat, rowboat, train. It was.
Oh, okay.
It was literally like that.
That is definitely to eliminate the absolute bottom of the list.
And then there was a more sophisticated one to sort of see what sort of trades.
Sort of separate the next group.
Yeah, and I did all right in that, but I didn't score in the top sort of percentile. So I chose what looked to me interesting, but
yeah.
But in hindsight, it was no use to Civvy Street whatsoever. But again, that's a decision that if I'd changed that and become, say, a vehicle mechanic or something, then
still life skills, wasn't it?
Yeah, but then possibly I might have left the army and just got a job as a mechanic, and then
that's true.
So you can't say what
still
what can
like
you do different.
School of life, though, isn't it? It's things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like that phrase, but you're right. I mean, it's like you're building up experience.
Different to academic. Put it that way. Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a lot of young writers writing now, and some of them are doing very, very good stuff. But a lot of them, because they're very young, they don't have any life
limited experience
of their own. So
you have a wealth of different things to pull from.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've got a very good memory as well. But so those writers are, in effect, they are limited to what they've either they can imagine or what they can,
or what other people have done,
or what other people have done.
What they've
exactly.
read. Yeah. Interesting.
I'm not saying that it's not without worth what they're doing.
Absolutely not.
And there's some exceptional stuff coming out, but when it comes down to it, and it's what you're saying before, if I have writer's block, there's always some memory I've got. It's just something funny that happened, or something horrible that happened, or just something horrific that somebody told you once, or just something I can, just to start. I mean, and and a little trick that I tell people is to, when you finish at night, stop in the middle of a sentence. Stop writing in the middle of a sentence, because then when you start the next day, it's very easy to pick up and just to finish that sentence. And once you start typing, then you're typing. But I don't listen to my own advice. It is a good idea.
Yeah.
But I don't do it.
It works sometimes, I would imagine.
I get to a point where I'm happy to start. I don't think I've got I'm not wired that way.
So what's your routine? What's your process when you're actually writing? What do you have around you? Like,
does
everything have to be just in I've got to have that there. I've got to do this.
No. I can only write in my office, and I only write Monday to Friday, apart from today when I changed a sentence in the book I'd sent to my agent.
Just comes to you.
Well, I just thought if I change it now, I can send him it before he's actually started it, hopefully. I have my computer, my iPad, just to do research on, and a good thesaurus, which I rarely use. I mean, Stephen King says any word you find in a thesaurus is the wrong word. There are no exceptions to that rule.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Because if you're looking at, then you're just going to choose something that nobody.
Yeah, it's not a word you would have anywhere near what you would have picked. It's not what you're looking for.
I mean, I think my writing style came from writing court reports for probation, because the whole point of those reports was they weren't meant to be read by other professionals. They were there to be read by the magistrates. The magistrates are untrained. And the offenders themselves, so they have to use straight, accessible language,
universal,
nothing flowery, and I've carried that through. So I do use quite direct.
Same for your readership, isn't it? You're going to get a broader
audience.
Absolutely.
I think that's what when we're saying at the start, which is why I do get recommended to people who don't ordinarily
Yeah.
read
There's
books.
no real entry level. It's anyone can pick one
And
up
Michael
read it.
Connolly, who's my favourite crime writer, and he's probably the gold standard crime writer. He used to be a court reporter for the LA Times, and he's got a very similar style, as in there's nothing flowery, it's just this is what happened, basically. He's just sort of trained himself, that's how he trained himself to write, and he's carried it on, and he's one of the most successful writers of crime fiction there's ever been. And his shows are on TV all the time, and films, and Amazon Prime, and all this sort of stuff, and he's like a multimillionaire. And he doesn't use all these like flowery. I mean, I write now. Every now and then, I'll just like stick my thumb. Right, I'm going to write something nice. And in Black Summer, I remember I wrote this entire paragraph about what this bush looked like in winter, and how the flowers, the petals were still like little nice buds and things like that. And there's beautiful little full of prose. I just went nah, just took it out. Thanks.
I tried.
Said it's not what you're known for. It's
No,
not
you
what,
stepped
it's not
out of
what
your
you
comfort
write.
zone there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's fine. I know how to write now. I mean, I'm confident I can do it. And I'm confident when I sit in front of my computer that it'll happen again. I mean, that's the big fear that everyone goes through. Is that you'll just go there and the well's dry and shit.
But you've got enough miles on the tank to know that.
Yeah, to know that it'll happen again.
Yeah.
And even if I have to force it sometimes, it's a process.
Yeah.
And like any process, you can learn. You can't teach someone to have an imagination, and you can't teach someone to have a sense of humor. Everything else can be learned.
So has your process changed much, or actually your writing in general since, like, say, 15 to now? Has much changed?
My process hasn't. I write a first draft and it's awful. I never go back and change things. So if I change my mind halfway through, I'll just live with it. So the first draft of the Puppet Show, Poe's name wasn't Poe; it was something else.
Was that when he first appeared?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it wasn't until it was during the primary season for the US election, so before the main election, so it'll be 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump had said something, and the Washington Post had reported on it. So I was reading something in the Washington Post. I burst out laughing. My wife said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Something in the Washington Post." She said, "What's the Washington Poe?" And I thought, "Ooh, there's a name."
Okay, right. Yeah.
But so I was about halfway through the book at that point, and Poe was just a much more mild-mannered guy. Tilly was a lot more streetwise than she was. But we can't call her Cumbrian Washington without explaining why. And when I found out his backstory, he became a whole lot darker. So therefore, I had to balance him out with making Tilly a whole lot lighter. So that's another stroke of luck. If that name hadn't appeared, it would have been a less, I don't know,
unique, or a bit more of a generic name. It would have ended up being.
Yeah, it would have been a bit more of a journeyman sort of series, possibly, and it would have attracted readers, no doubt, because my previous series has got a loyal. But it wouldn't have sort of taken off. It wouldn't have been a Sunday Times bestseller now, which is something I never thought would happen. So yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. A lot of people won't tell you in writing. There is an awful lot of luck. So there are better writers than me who've never had the breaks I've had, and there are worse writers than me that have had bigger breaks. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. Hopefully, you'll think the cream rises to the top.
It usually does.
And in writing, it rises to the top. But if it's not quality cream, it quite frankly sinks again, because as readers don't come back for the second one. They're reading, oh yeah, that was all right, but I'm not bothered. What you want?
That's true. Yeah.
In an ideal world, you want a series to start off slow. Absolutely. So you want to be like the Ian Rankin thing. Ian Rankin didn't really make it till book 6 or 7, and now he's the biggest selling.
And then people go.
And then you got
backwards.
Then you got huge backlists. I mean, 50% of your sales normally come from your backlist, which the bigger your backlist gets,
it's like
there's more money.
When you find a new band, you listen to their album and you go backwards.
Absolutely.
Or today's if you find a podcast and you go, oh, I've just listened to episode 50. I've got 49 more to go back and listen to.
It's exactly what you want.
So what was the decision to leave the army then? Was that just you just suddenly decided you had enough?
Spur of the moment. Honestly, it was. I was stationed at Catterick, and I got permission to live out. So I was living at home in Newcastle, and I just walked into the office one day and I said, I want to sign off. That's what it was called, which is basically given a year's notice. Right. Which was no use to anyone, but it's why I could have done my A-levels in the last year. But obviously I didn't think of that. And they use it as a retention policy actually, because you can't get a job if they said right, you just have to give 2 weeks notice. People who are unhappy will just go out and get another job, then they'll give notice. But you can't go and get a job and
So
say,
you're in
right,
limbo for a year.
yeah, I'll be with you in a year. That's just not how it works. So you have to basically take a punt that you're going to find employment. So I went in one day, I said, right, I'm going to sign off. And then I didn't have a clue. I absolutely didn't have a clue what I was gonna do.
Zero plans.
I didn't. And I worked for Northumberland Wildlife Trust. And because I did like 2 mornings a week with them, I thought I was an expert in otters. And I went for a job as the sort of manager of the otter reserve near Kielder or wherever it was anyway. And there was some weird clerical error that got me through to the interview stage. And it was an error because I got 2 letters. One said, you haven't been successful. And the other one said, landed on the mat at the same time.
Congratulations.
It was letters at that point. Yeah, congratulations, you got an interview. And the other one said, commiserations. So I rang them up and they said, yeah, I've got an interview. Please do come in. And I was in the waiting room with they all had environmental degrees and biology degrees. And I just left the army. I can fix guns. So I didn't get that. But I carried on with the trust because it was just good fun. It was getting me out of the house. I didn't want to get a job for a while. And then I was walking past the university with some pals from the army, actually. It was at Christmas. And I just happened to walk past the university, Newcastle University. So I'm going to do a degree. That's what I'm going to do. And I looked through the book, and social work was the only one that was 2 years. All the rest were 3, so I thought I'll do that. And I just made up some bullshit when I was at the interview, because you had to be interviewed to be a social worker. So I pretended I was like a really nice person.
It was really tough, but I managed it.
And I got on that, and then I met my friend, probably my best friend now, a fellow called Crawford Bunny, who said, I'm going to be a probation officer. And I said, what's that then? And he told us. I said, well, I want to be a probation officer as well then. So I had to quickly go and change some elements of the course. And I said, well, I want to work in Cumbria because I've been going over to Cumbria for my holidays and to my friends in Keswick. And that's exactly what I am. So I waited. So I worked as a social worker in Whitley Bay for a bit. But then I got a job in as a probation officer in Whitehaven.
Okay.
On the west coast. And
You're still writing through all of this?
no, I wasn't really writing them because that was in '99. I wasn't ill till 2003.
Right.
I was promoted to senior probation officer after 4 years, and I started on the Monday. And on Thursday, I was rushed into hospital and didn't leave for 8 months. So that had a lot of value out of me. But luckily, I was on sick pay. You got sick pay for 12 months in probation, 6 months full and 6 months half. So at least I was getting decently paid for it. And I had my mortgage paid off and everything because it was like critical illness, all that type of stuff. So I came out, all my hair grown back. I was like thinking, well, I thought this is great, but not really. And that's when I started to sort of write again, but not seriously. And it was another 10 years, about 8 or 9 years before I actually started to write, to properly write. And I couldn't type or anything. I had to get someone else to do my typing for me because...
what kind of cancer was it, if you don't mind me asking?
It was something called Burkitt's lymphoma, which is an incredibly rare blood cancer, usually found in the jaws of South African children. So, yay, lucky me.
How on earth?
No idea, but it's so rare that my consultant in the West Cumberland Hospital didn't have the staff to deal with it, so I had to go to the RVI. So I was an inpatient in the RVI.
So there was no sort of build-up to it?
No, I remember on the day I was taken to hospital, I had like a stomach ache. I was trying with Johnson's, whatever, like a thing that you bit of jollop. Yeah. Andrews, not Johnson's. Johnson's baby powder. I wasn't drinking baby powder. So then at night, my girlfriend at the time, she said, "You don't look well." I said, "Well, I don't feel well." She said, "Well, let's get you out to Q-Doc." And he felt around and he felt a lump in my side. And the fact that it was rock hard, and even, as soon as he goes, your abdomen's rock hard, I thought, there's something properly wrong here. And I was admitted that night. I had a massive operation, 12 hours, 2 teams of surgeons and things. And
that was just the cancer, was it?
Yeah, they took it out. It was the size of a rugby ball.
Wow.
And it's incredibly fast growing. So they took it out, and then had to go and be sort of decide what they had to cut it into bits and see what it was.
Yeah.
And by the time they got an answer, it was that was just before Christmas, and it was just after Christmas so I spent Christmas at the West Cumberland Hospital. That was a laugh. I think when the carol singers come in to cheer you up.
That's the last thing you want.
Yeah, exactly. Stand right by your bed. God wish you would. So yeah, by the time I think it was about a 20-day gap between my operation and finding out what it was, and by that time it was already the size of a tennis ball again.
Jeez, crazy.
So I was in but straight away they said, look, this is a kill or cure cancer. You won't be in remission. It'll kill you and you'll just be dead soon, or it'll be completely cured and you won't get it again. Or if you get it again, it won't be it growing back. It'll just be.
What can you say to that? You just
bad luck. Yeah. So
it's like a punch in the face.
Yeah, and in I think it was the back end of January. I'd just finished my first course of treatment, and it didn't appear to be working. And they said, "Right, we're going to have to arrange palliative care." I mean, I was whacked out of my face of morphine, so I was still, that's good. I said, "We're just going to take a sliver of bone from your hip, just to confirm it's now in your bone, because that's basically the confirmation we need." And they did that, and they said, "Actually, it's not. Yeah, so we're just going to give you another round of treatment. You're supposed to have 3 rounds anyway." And then I started to respond to it.
Wow.
But now they're saying it's because you were so weak because of the big operation. They said ideally, if we'd known what it was, you wouldn't have done the operation. We could have shrank. It was a massive tumour. We still could have shrank it. So I came out with sort of mobility problems, and I mean, I had to have a Zimmer. I could barely walk. I had to have a Zimmer frame. I was so weak.
So how long are we talking from when you first knew about it to when you almost recovered?
I was given what they call a complete response back in the start of June, maybe. I was in the RVI for the best part of 6 months.
This is 2003?
Sorry?
2003?
It was Christmas 2003. I had my operation, so it was actually early January 2004 that I went to the RVI, and I didn't come out until either back end of May or the start of June. I can't remember.
It feels like a blur, does it?
Well, now I sort of remember it quite fondly, but mainly because it's just given me so much material to work with. Just some things that you
not that you knew it at the time.
No, but
the fact that you've got a good memory as well is a
I mean, it was horrific for mainly. It was horrific. I mean, I was on morphine virtually the entire time, so it was worse for everyone else, I suspect. But my friends from university would come in, particularly on Friday nights, would come and eat all my sandwiches, because I wasn't eating at all.
Yeah.
Before they went out on the piss, they would come and just like raid, what have you got in your cupboards? Because people bring in food, but I didn't, so I lost half my body weight. I just wasn't eating at all. They had to put me on this like drip thing, which actually was drip feeding food, didn't make, because I just wasn't eating. So my friends would come and eat all my sandwiches. So anyway, I mean that was that. But I started to write a few years after that.
So you went back to the prison service?
I went back to probation. I was back that year. I was back in September. I had to have splints on my feet because my ankles had no control of my ankles, so I was like walking these big plastic things.
You're like a robot.
I mean, it was horrific. I mean, thinking back, it was awful. I don't even know why I'm talking about it. So
it's unbelievable, to be fair.
It was one of those. But I mean, what it did, it made me more of a risk taker.
Made you more of a risk taker.
Yeah, because the worst thing. What's the worst thing? The worst thing's already happened.
You've come through that.
So I went into hospital quite shy. Came out. I just didn't care what people thought of me. I mean, I just didn't. But shyness is basically you just care too much what people think, and you're terrified of.
It holds you back, basically.
It absolutely does. I mean, it should be classed as a social anxiety. There should be treatment on the NHS for it, because I mean, if you've got extreme shyness, your life's knackered. It really is. So I came out, and I can now talk in front. I mean, I did in one of those surreal things in 2018. Puppet Show was just out. It was only out in hardback, wasn't out in paperback then. And I got an email saying, "Would like you to be a guest speaker on a Saga Cruise." And
Saga, is that the?
That's, the over 50s one.
Okay, yeah.
It's like a Tories club. There's not a white person there, not a black person there. It's all white, middle class.
Right,
it looks like the golf club. And it was nice. But, I mean, I went there and they said, "Would like you to be a guest. We're doing a crime cruise. Basically, you'll get 2 weeks freeholder. You'll get an outside cabin, and your commitment is 2 45-minute lectures." So I thought, well, okay, what do you want? She said, "We have to come down to audition." I said, "I'm not doing that. I don't want to do it then." They said, "All right, that's a shame." And about 2 days later, they came back and said, "Look, we'd like you to do it, and we don't want you to audition. We've seen your website, and we've spoken to your publisher, that type of thing." So we tootled off Saga Cruise in Southampton, and it was me and Ross Kemp. he was and Tony Stamp from the bill.
How random!
So I did these like two. I didn't do it. Well, actually, I did some prep for the first one. They said the first one has to be how to write a crime novel. So I did some prep for that. But then my computer broke. Almost straight away, my PowerPoint thing. So I basically the point I was trying to make is, so it was like about 600 old fogies in this room, some on oxygen tanks and all sorts. And I just waffled for 45 minutes like that, made them laugh. And then Ross Kemp came on in the old chair. And then me and Ross Kemp went and had fish and chips and got drunk on red wine, which was quite fun. He gave us his mobile phone number, which I suspect he wishes he hadn't. But, so it was just one of those things. It was a life changing experience. It was in all sorts of ways.
So what about the second talk? How did that go? What did they want that one about?
I can't remember what I did for the second one. It was about me.
Okay,
I'm an expert in me, so I don't have to do any prep whatsoever.
If you did, I need a computer for this.
So I just got up and I didn't get invited back. So I'm not
Where
sure
did it go? The cruise? Where did it?
It was round the Canary Islands and Portugal and Madeira. Actually, me and my wife actually used to go. Well, still will when we're allowed back to Madeira on holiday. And there was a big storm, and we actually got stuck in Madeira for 3 days. So, which is quite cool because we knew it like the back of our hand. So it was like getting straight off to our sort of the local places that we. But we also bumped into this. Bump into it. It was a really heavy storm. So suddenly there was just like the port at Madeira was just full of cruise ships getting out of the storm, including this one called the World, and. The guys on the boat were saying it's a really interesting ship. Now Google it, and it's a private yacht, and it's on what they call an infinite cruise, and it's basically like a cruise ship for rich people, and they buy a room or a cabin or whatever, and the cheapest one is $5 million. You've got to have double that in the bank before they'll even consider you. And we're just looking at all this fantastic, and they basically
pull that up. I want to see that.
Yeah,
World cruise ship.
It's called the World. I don't think it's the biggest one now, or even the most expensive.
That sounds incredible.
And it was initially thought they would just go from like major sporting event to major sporting event because it's not on any itinerary. The people on the boat decide what it is to do. So they go to the Olympics and the World Cup, and then all these major sort of events. There it is. And I mean, because we were birthed beside it,
Wow.
And so we were walking past it, and there was all these like guys getting off with like little backpacks going for a walk around Madeira, and well, they're like multi-millionaires. Should we mug them? See what they got? See what they got in the bag.
It's like no wonder they haven't got the prices on the website.
No, I mean it might have changed now, but I suspect it hasn't. But it was. I think it.
What does it say? Go to our story. See if it tells you like. Why are we doing this?
There was, I know that it was an even more expensive one. It was put to sea a few years ago because I sort of kept a weather eye on it because I thought it would be an interesting place to have a crime set. That Poe could potentially go and investigate. But
residential advisor. They've even got their own residential advisors. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, and some of that. I mean, there's like Michelin-starred restaurants in it, and sommeliers and all sorts, and people come on with their staff, and some of them just use it 2 weeks of the year, and it costs you to buy the thing. Then there's the rent or the whatever, like the service charge, whatever, which is like hundreds of thousands of dollars as well. Like, I mean, it's.
God, you can imagine the application form. Imagine how the process to go through to get on there. You have to be investigated by a financial investigator first.
Probably. I can't see the prices on. So.
I never thought there would be a room on a boat that was bigger and better than my house, my entire house.
I mean,
that's incredible.
It is, but I mean, it was.
I can imagine your ship that you were on wasn't too bad either.
Well, no, I mean Saga, because the boutique cruises really, so they're not. There's not like 5,000 people like some of these.
No, but the quality of them was
so these
pretty
awful ones. I mean, it's quite small. There's only about 800 people on, which is small. The staff to cruise, whatever they're called, ratio is very good. I mean, and because we were sort of eating. I mean, everything's free. It's completely all inclusive. But we just couldn't do enough. I mean, because even though we were sort of staff technically, we didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So it was like, if it was lamb chops one night, they said, how do you want them cooked? Rare. And we normally serve 2, but would you like any more? And I'd say, yeah, I can have 8, please. I said, yeah, if you want. And said, we've got lobster on. I said, can I have a little bit, just put a little bit of lobster on the side. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
This is life.
Yeah.
I was going to say, can you pull up Dead Ground, his latest book? I want to see the cover of it. How do you like decide what is going to be on the cover of one of your books?
I don't.
Nothing, you have nothing to do with it.
I again, it's one of those consultant things, because the cover of the puppet show was different. It was basically the puppet show written in flames, and it wasn't until Black Summer that they sort of settled on the brand. So if you bring up Black Summer, they've gone for like, there's like basically a door in every one of my books now.
Yeah. Now that you mention it,
not the zombie show.
not the Black Summer book or novel.
Yeah, there it is. So the creator's the same. They've got they've got a brand now. So Dead Ground was always going to be a sort of a door at some point. And I said, because my editor has to do a cover brief because it goes to the design and then the design work off that. But Sean, the guy, he always speaks to me. And he says, and I said, well, look, this one, it's a bank vault. So that was the cover of the hardback. So it wasn't until the paperback of Black Summer that they actually found the brand. So book 5, The Botanist, that'll be the same. It'll be a door or some kind. Because I mean, it's just it's branding.
It's a bit of identity, yeah,
branding.
Is that normal? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
As soon as they had the cover for Black Summer, they said, right, that's the brand that we want to stick with. We're going to build that brand. And they redesigned the puppet show. So if you have a look at the top there, the puppet show cover there was the flaming cover. If you go to...
Oh, yeah. The letters in flames.
Yeah, but they reissued that as a... in a blue with a door on it. So
it has to have a door at some point.
It does. So
that's fair enough. It's just interesting because what reminded me is you're wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt, and they're one of the most visually recognisable brands.
Yeah, I mean every Iron Maiden t-shirt has that at the top in that sort of Germanic script.
Yeah, it might be a different colour.
Eddie's normally on the front.
Yeah. There's a connection because I had Iron Maiden posters on my wall before I even knew how Iron Maiden were. The pictures and the posters were just so amazing. Sometimes you get them in a magazine. I just put them on the wall. But it was like that could be 10 years before I actually listened to the music.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of Iron Maiden, when we were on the cruise, I was really seasick one day. The day before my first speech, actually, because we'd hit a bit of open water, and I was I don't normally get seasick. So my wife was absolutely fine. She said, "Can I do anything for you?" And I said, "Iron Maiden have just released the tour tickets, the world tour t-shirts. Do you want me to get you some?" I said, "Yeah, if you can. Where do you want to go?" I went, "Vegas." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, yeah. So we got them for the next year. So went to Vegas in 2019, which is probably the last cool thing I did.
When everything was normal.
Yeah, it wasn't even a thing. Actually, we went to see Dropkick Murphys in Ali Pali in London.
Yeah.
And that was February 2020. And there was just starts of hints of it coming then. Yeah. So we actually had washing our hands after touching the because you didn't really know how it was. No. People thought then you sort of picked it up and put it in your mouth, didn't you? I mean,
and masks weren't even mentioned at all.
Yeah, no. In fact, they were against masks.
Yeah.
If you go, so that was the last time I'd sort of been to a concert. But we've got some lined up for the back end of the year and the start of next year. So
how did COVID affect you generally, or did it not much from a
I work from
perspective?
Home. I mean, my wife worked from home, but she only works 2 days a week. Anyway, so she now works from home. But really, we get on anyway. So
always helps.
Yeah, so it wasn't a problem. I mean, we couldn't share an office because I mean, she works for domestic abuse charity, so she was taking all these interesting phone calls. So I was like typing away on
that went up.
And Poe did this, and then I'm like, huh? So I was like, more interested.
Slower.
Yeah. Can you get them? Because I can only hear one side of an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing the spare bedroom into a little office for her as well.
Right.
But my productivity it's been sky high.
You had the time. You had nothing else to do.
Well, I mean, a lot of writers they couldn't. It was just too upsetting, and I was like, oh, well, yeah, that's all right. Everyone has their own experience, but
You kind of got to make the most of the situation, haven't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's no festivals on, so you got no distractions.
Yeah.
All right, I appreciate some of you had kids and you had to do homeschooling, which you weren't used to or expecting.
Which could have been a nightmare.
And I don't. I mean, I wrote an awful lot during, particularly the first 2 lockdowns, but I don't brag about that because everyone's had their own COVID
You
experience.
made the most of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, some people have had an awful time of it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I mean, living in Cumbria, I've got a Springer Spaniel, so I'm able to go out and walk the Springer Spaniel any time I want in beautiful countryside. So I don't live
Very fortunate.
in a city in a high-rise flat where, when lockdown, it meant you were actually locked down.
Couldn't leave. But you used, like I say, you used the time efficiently.
Yeah, why not?
Gave
Because
you
I would say it's what I do for. I mean, it's my job.
Yeah.
Anytime I get sort of a bit up myself, my wife either brings me down to earth, but I think, well, it's my job.
You need that though.
Absolutely, I can't decide I'm not going to write today because
Yeah,
you
have to.
I'm in effect self-employed, and it's just
Yeah.
so-
That's it. So how far ahead do you think you could go, like time-wise now, if you didn't do any more writing? How much
2 years.
words? 2 years?
Yeah,
Next
my
2
agent
years.
says I could have 2 years off now for one.
Wow, well, you won't though, but
Well, no, because when I had time off in the past, I wrote. So
maybe writing in COVID's allowed you to sort of get ahead of yourself.
well, and also because they bought that standalone I wrote when I was still in probation, and that's getting its own release 1 year. So
Right.
that's in effect bought me 2 years. That's bought me the extra year, and because I'm so far ahead with book 6, because I wouldn't normally finish. I wouldn't normally submit it till the end of the year, but it was written. I finished it in July, so I'm not going to take 2 years off because I don't know what I would do. I would write.
Hopefully, if gigs start going again, you'll be going to a lot of gigs. But
I did that anyway, and I've still never been anywhere near missing a deadline.
but you enjoy doing it, so, so you wouldn't want to take 2 years off.
I mean, when it starts to become a bit of a slog, then I might think, well, I'll go back to one book every 2 years or something like that.
That's what you never want to happen. You never want it to become like a job.
No, I mean Ian Rankin, he just writes a book every 2 years now, by and large, because he doesn't need the cash.
Go and live a little.
His publisher's going to just do whatever he says, basically. Cause
but he's earned the right to do that, hasn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I haven't earned that right yet.
You'll get there.
I remember my titles. I never get my titles. Absolutely not. Dead Ground, I wanted to call the 13th Rat.
So these aren't your decisions?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Well,
my agent just says, you're not going to get that.
And that's commonplace. That's normal.
Yeah,
as well?
yeah, they get the final say on covers because it's sales. I mean, sales rule everything in the sales department because they know what sells. And they said you can't have a book with rat in the title because the supermarkets won't buy it.
So I missed that. What did you want to call Dead Ground?
The 13th Rat.
Okay, right.
Dead Ground was actually going with the title of my 7th book. So I just said, well, and I came up with all sorts of titles. It was actually originally called the 13 Rat Theory because it was the name of a song by the Anti-Nowhere League. And then the 13th Rat, I thought that's possibly more palatable. And then they said, nah, supermarkets won't buy it because it's got rat in the title and there's a subliminal thing going on. Just as that you wouldn't try and get a book in the supermarket with cockroaches on the cover. You just don't do it. And so sales just say no, come back with another cover. And also they're looking at international as well, so you can't have anything too local. Because they're thinking we need to sell this book in Australia and South Africa and all the other places that they've got the rights for.
I've never even thought about anything like that.
I mean, the original title for Puppet Show was Welcome to the Puppet Show, so that's the closest one I've had. And I was said, you're not having that. Go away and find a title, and then we'll choose one. If you can't, then we'll just check one. So I sent a list back with like the Black Lake and just all sorts of nonsense. And then my editor says, I was out with the agent last night in the Ivy Club and we decided just to go with the Puppet Show because sales like it because it's got a more international appeal. So I could have just saved a month's worth of work there, but thanks a lot for that. Black Summer, actually, I kept that title because it just fitted in. Everything was fitted in. But ever since then, I've not had a single title I've liked.
I just blow my mind. I've never even thought of that because it's.
Well, same with the cover. If they want to have a guy mooning on the front, that's what they'd have. And I'd say, well, what's got nothing to do with the story? And they'll say sales. Sales have said that.
But I'm thinking that like the cover and the title should tie in with the content, a bit like a song or an album cover.
Yeah.
Usually, you'd want it to sort of mean something. As a musician myself, if someone tried to like rename my song or redo my album cover, I'd be like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, I get that, but I also get that the job of a title in particular, because most books are in bookshops spine out, so you only get the title.
Yeah.
So you want an interesting title. So the job of that title is just to get someone to pick it off the shelf. Then they'll look at the front cover.
Yeah.
Then the job of the front cover is to make them look at the back cover. And it's the back cover where you write the blurb, what the book's about.
Yeah. All those steps are very important.
It absolutely is. And then the inside of the book, when they get the back, they're not going to say, "Oh, actually, I don't understand what the title was about now."
Yeah.
You forget about the title. Now, if you look at Michael Connelly's books, I couldn't tell you what his title. With very few exceptions, the titles of his books have nothing to do with the story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ask somebody, "What's your favourite Michael Connelly book?" they won't tell you the title. They'll tell you what happens in the story.
Oh, the one where...
Yeah, it is. It'll be the one
yeah.
where he found the serial killer, but who nobody knew existed because there was a bit of speck of blood on an old belt, that type of thing.
That's cool.
So, yeah. So, which is why authors don't get involved in anything, basically. I mean, they want us to write the books and just
hand it over,
keep out of the way until it's time to start promoting the books. And even then, they're a bit dubious. I remember once Hills Wholesales in Workington. They're a big book sale. They serve all. They do all the local bookshops, and they do the service stations around here, and a few of that, a Booth supermarket, and they do all their books. And I got a request to go, and I can't remember what it was actually, but I sent it to sales and said, "No, we'll do that. You just keep away. Nothing. This is our job. Sales is our job. Writing the book's your job. Just back off, buddy."
But yeah, so. When will you? Do you know when your next book is coming out?
Yeah, June the 2nd.
Next year, obviously.
Yeah. They're on. I think the next 3 are on the internet if you know where to look.
Right. Okay.
One a year, and it's always June, which annoys my wife because her birthday's early June, so her birthday gets swamped up with my book stuff. Because the first 2 weeks of sales are important. That's when they want the author to be proactive and attend events and things like that. So, but she's normally fine because normally go down to London. We used to go down to London for the book launches.
Yeah. We will get back to normal eventually.
It will, yeah. and I think there's plans to get me down to Covent Garden for next year.
Yeah.
Which will combine Joe's birthday with that. It'll be nice.
So even though that's better part of a year away, it's all been decided. Everything about it's done. Now you just forget about it until
the first time I find out when my book's out is when I see it on Amazon.
You don't get an email or something?
No, absolutely not. Because the paperback Dead Ground's out a little bit earlier than usual because it's normally December. It's out in November this year.
I bought it on Kindle.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I see. I think that's where I get the most money. I get 25% of what the publishers receive, whereas
you're very welcome.
I get thank you. Yeah.
For me, it's just convenience because I don't have a lot of room for books.
I still read in the Kindle. I mean, we're living in. It's living in the modern age. People will consume their media however they want to.
Who will only read it in a physical form, and I get that. And I was a bit like that for CDs for a while, but eventually you just got to cave into technology and convenience.
Yeah, I mean we stream television now. We stream music. I don't stream music. I
you still old school?
I download it. I got rid of all my LPs when I was in the army, actually. Cause
I bet you wish you hadn't done that.
Yeah, I do, absolutely. So when I was 50, my wife said, "I'm going to get you a record player." I said, "Please don't, because that'll kill us. That will buying records that I give away will kill me. It will physically kill me."
To be fair, that's still going. It's still there, that market. There'll always be a market for LPs.
Oh yeah, they're making an absolute resurgence, aren't they?
They're
really got...
Because whatever format you use, you cannot replicate that sound.
No, absolutely.
It's very unique.
No,
so.
it's If I had to do one thing again, I would keep all of my records.
Yeah. As many people say that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you didn't know. Yeah, it's like certain cars have become classics, and people are like, I had one of them. But you had no idea it was going to become such an icon. Otherwise, you wouldn't have sold it for 20 quid.
I remember someone actually, their Amazon account was cancelled for whatever reason. They've been abusing it or the returns policy, and they didn't realise that that meant all their Kindle books were returned. As in, you don't actually technically own the books. So when the Amazon account was, all their books just went off the Kindle. I had a hell of a job, and there was a big court case about who actually, when you buy a Kindle book, do you actually physically own it, or can Amazon just they cancel your Kindle account, do all your books be? It was a weird thing. Because if the same with my iTunes, I got 15,000 songs on my iTunes account, mainly punk or metal. And if I suddenly fell out with Apple for whatever reason, and then I went to update, iTunes once, and suddenly my library was empty. Are they allowed to do that? I mean, you're not going to win a court case against Apple.
No. Yeah. So I was going to ask, what advice would you give to someone who was looking to get into writing now?
Right.
Just keep writing.
Two bits of advice, actually. Read Stephen King's On Writing. That's the best book about the art of writing. It's very interesting. It's an autobiography, but it also gives you loads of really, really good advice. The number one bit of advice is just write your first draft. Don't worry about what it looks like.
Yeah.
Don't worry if it's shit. It's supposed to be shit. Because editing, you can't edit a blank bit of paper. I mean, he's basically saying.
You also can't improve what you don't start.
Absolutely. So that's the main bit of advice, is read Stephen King's On Writing. But part of that advice will be to write and just keep on writing.
Yeah.
Some people will write 1 million words before they get published. Some people are very lucky and they'll write the first thing they write will get published. Now, I've got friends who've been trying to get published for 15, 16 years, and now they're Sunday Times bestsellers, so don't get disheartened, but just write.
Yeah.
Keep on writing. Practice. It is something that you can get better at.
Cool. Oh, man, thanks for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, it's been fun.
We'll have you on again sometime when you've done some more stuff and some more books have come out, and we can
I'll
remind you what you've done.
Yes, please do. And if you can tell me what my books are about, that'd be excellent. Yes.
But I've just looking at the reviews on people going mad for this stuff.
It's doing very well. Yeah. People absolutely love it. They love Tilly and Poe. I mean, that's basically the beating heart of the story is their sort of friendship and the way they bounce off each other. And
I'm definitely going to dive back in and go through all this, because I've never even read something that's part of a series. I've read standalone stuff, so it's a different experience for me. But I've experienced it in TV, obviously, when you watch a series, but in written format, it's completely different. But it's also how you imagine things. So how your words make the reader imagine. It is things,
absolutely,
which for everybody's different.
Because when the TV series was announced, when the option, the TV company wanted Jerome Flynn for Poe.
Right.
And I've mentioned now that the option's been given back to me, so I own the rights again. I've been able to say, they wanted Jerome Flynn.
Yeah.
And the divisiveness that caused, I mean, it's just outrageous. I mean, I thought, poor Jerome Flynn, he's getting a hammer in here for something he probably doesn't even know about.
So how are you with social media then, generally?
I don't like it, but I do it.
Yeah.
I enjoy Twitter, actually. I think Twitter's quite fun.
Okay.
I think you can have a lot of fun on Twitter. I think my publicist is sort of wary.
Yeah.
That I'm just like one bad tweet away from getting cancelled. But so far, I've dodged it.
They can't stop you writing, though.
They can't. I'll just change my name and come back.
That's true. Oh, that's what I was going to ask. So, who was the decision for it to be M.W. Craven, not just Mike Craven?
My editors.
Sorry?
My editor.
Okay.
Because I've been published under Mike with my first publisher.
Right.
So that was actually the first thing they said. I went down to a Carmelite house in London. It's on the embankment facing the Thames. And in the lift, she said, "We love the book. We love because they asked for some changes, which I did over Christmas. We love the changes, so I think we're good to go. Just two things: we hate the title, and we hate your name." I was like, all right, okay. I said, "Why do you hate my name?" I said, "Well, we don't hate it. It's just you've been published under Mike before, so we need to publish under something else. Have you got a middle name?" I said, "William." I said, "M.W. Craven," and she looked at my agent. He went, "Yeah, I'm happy with that." So, and at that point, I was just desperate to get a deal with Little Brown. So I was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah," and I still wouldn't. I don't mind it. I don't mind it now. Cool. But somebody asked me the other day, actually, just that same question: "Why aren't you Mike?"
Yeah. But it's a fairly it happens quite often, doesn't it? Like initials.
Well, some of it's just to get a gender neutral name in.
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling that was part of her reasons for dropping the Joanne, but part of it was because she was a victim of domestic violence and she didn't want to advertise too much about her personal life. So I mean, it's again, but that's a publisher's decision, so you don't even have control. So if they'd said, actually, M.W. Craven, it's too close to someone else, they would have said, right, we're going to call you Freddie Fishhead, something like that. And I would say, okay. And I said, I don't want to be called Freddie Fishhead. He said, well, tough, you're going to be. I'm going to write that down. That's a good name.
He's actually writing that down.
Yeah. I tell you, book 7, there's going to be somebody called Freddie Fishhead.
And it was created right here. Glad we could document that for you. Cheers for coming down, man. I really enjoyed finding out about you. And we'll do it again sometime.
Okay.
Cheers, man. Thank you.